morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on Bloomberg Quint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines this morning. Asian markets are off to a mixed start as investors await further cues from the US retail sales and progress on trade talks. India's trade deficit narrowed in the month of June as a slowing economy led to a curb in imports. The government will look to raise close to 11,000 crore rupees from the fifth tranche of the CPSE exchange-traded fund, according to a senior government official. The offer will open on Thursday. 3 companies of the IL&FS Group have entered into a pact with secured lenders as part of their debt resolution process. And the Reserve Bank of India has imposed a 7 crore rupee fine on India's largest lender, State Bank of India, for failing to comply with norms pertaining to fraud and income recognition. Let's talk about equities on Wall Street, where benchmark indices closed with fresh record highs. Rally in technology shares offset losses in banking and energy stocks. Renita Young of Bloomberg News tells you what happened in that session in this report.
U.S. equities ended higher on Monday as a tech rally sparked fresh records in U.S. stocks, all happening at the start of the week in which we'll see tons of Fed speakers and U.S. economic data come down the line. Also coming down the line, U.S. corporate earnings for U.S. banks, which started off during the session on Monday. Now, gains in the technology sector actually worked to outweigh losses in the energy and banking sectors. Among those banks was the first to report its earnings during the session, which was Citigroup, which came within analyst expectations in some sectors, but closed the session at around unchanged from the previous session on Friday. Meanwhile, we did see that treasuries and the U.S. dollar did climb during the session. However, WTI sunk to below $60 a barrel. And that's a look at your Monday Wall Street action. In New York, I'm Renita Young for Bloomberg News.
All right, let's also take a check on the Asian markets. Rosalind Shin is joining us live from the Bloomberg studios in Hong Kong. Good morning, Rosalind. A few more markets coming on stream the last couple of minutes. How is everything looking this morning?
Well, to be honest, it's pretty lackluster right now. We've got Japan playing catch-up after a public holiday yesterday, but you mentioned the markets coming on stream. We've got the Shanghai Composite and the CSI Index opening lower today, and the Hong Kong Hang Seng Index, Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index up by just 0.1% right now. Overall, though, pretty uneventful right now, I have to say, on the Asian markets. We've got the Nikkei 225 and the Topix both down by about 0.5%, dipping to the red. Really, we've got the yen at currently 108.01 to the US dollar. The SMBC's Nikko Securities at Toshihiko Matsuno saying that basically as long as the yen is trading at levels that are higher than the Tankan's forecast, which is at 109.35, then these worries are going to hang over corporate earnings. And we do know, of course, that earnings season is kicking off right now. Now, in China, the GDP number, which we saw coming out yesterday, showed the slowest growth in nearly 3 decades last quarter at 6.2%. It could be set to slow even further because while yesterday's retail sales numbers and also the industrial output numbers did beat expectations, there's little evidence that the economy has completely bottomed out, according to some analysts. In trade news, we've got the U.S. Trade Secretary Stephen Mnuchin and the Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer having calls with officials from China this week, and then saying also that they may go to Beijing for more talks if those phone calls are productive. Looking elsewhere around the region, the S&P ASX 200 index making gains of just under 0.1% right now. Investors there are awaiting the minutes of the last RBA meeting. It could indicate perhaps a willingness to pause after cutting rates twice already from the RBA. Conversely, we've got New Zealand. Now, we've seen second quarter inflation coming in line with expectations at 1.7% year on year, but business conditions have been, business confidence has been weakening, and there's also manufacturing and spending intake data, which have been a little bit soft. So perhaps indicating that the economy is lacking the momentum to hit the 2% target that the central bank has hit, and it could strengthen the case for the RBNZ to cut rates next month. The RBNZ did hold rates last month when it met. So a few factors there to look out for when we're looking at Aussie and New Zealand. Back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Rosalind. Now, I do want to talk a little bit more about what Rosalind mentioned with regard to the trade talks between the US and China. After silence for nearly 2 weeks, The trade talks between the US and China seem to be heading back on track, or at least in the right direction. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said that telephone conversations with his Chinese counterpart are likely this week, which may result in face-to-face talks in Beijing going forward. This also comes after President Donald Trump and his tweets talking about China's slowest recorded economic growth in the second quarter, and also saying that his tariffs are having the desired effect or impact. Jody Schneider of Bloomberg News brings you more.
This would be only the second time that there have been talks since that G20 meeting. However, there's some optimism, and Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer say they could be going to Beijing to have face-to-face talks if this call goes well. So they're still talking about talks, but it does look like they are making progress. One area seems to be of focus seems to be the U.S.'s desire for China to buy more agricultural goods from the U.S. That's something that President Trump said the Chinese had agreed to move these talks forward. President Trump had also taken further tariffs, raising tariffs off the table while they talked. So it looks like they are making progress. The question is how much, and will it be enough to get them to have face-to-face talks soon? There had been no timetable put on making a deal when they met. But of course, China wants this to move forward. We saw those numbers yesterday about slowing growth. There's incentive on their side, and there's also incentive on President Trump's side. The 2020 reelection, his 2020 reelection campaign is heating up, and to be able to say he made a deal with China would give him something significant to run on.
Now, meanwhile, yesterday, at least, a lot of people here in office were busy checking Amazon for the deals that are available. The 5th annual Prime Day sale is underway, as you probably know. It is expected to garner sales worth over $6 billion, a projected 11% rise compared to last year. Spencer Sopper of Bloomberg News brings you more.
Sales of electronics and small kitchen appliances are way up compared to a typical day, about 4 to 5 times typical sales. That's expected. One thing that's jumping out is that sales of non-perishable grocery items, things like toilet paper, potato chips, crackers, those are up like 2 to 3 times. So it shows how, you know, this the bargain hunting on Prime Day extends beyond these kind of big ticket purchases and includes more everyday items people buy at a grocery store.
So is there anything new about this year's event?
A couple things. One would be worker unrest. So Amazon has faced protests in the past in Europe around Black Friday and Prime Day. This is the first year that they faced a strike in the U.S. on their big Prime Day sales event. Some workers in Minnesota were agitating for better worker conditions and staging a protest. The other thing is that Amazon's leaned very heavily on celebrities. It's a traditional marketing tactic to use celebrities to, move merchandise and get people into stores or onto websites. It's something that Amazon typically hasn't done. They've always had the novelty of their own offering and their own deals and their own products, like their Echo speakers and such. This is the first year that Amazon's really embraced the celebrity star power to try to maintain the hype around this event, which is now in its 5th year and facing a lot of competition.
All right. Well, I wonder whether you guys have found any interesting deals. I've certainly been looking, but Agam Vakil is joining me to tell you all about the day's trade, and I'm actually wondering what he's been looking at when it comes to the Amazon Prime Day sale. Let's find out. Agam, did you find anything interesting?
No, I was looking for some fitness trackers, but they were still way above my budget, so unfortunately I could not find anything. But yes, if you want to talk about the markets, I'm sure there will be a lot of things out there which will be in budget now, considering the kind of correction that we've seen in the mid-cap space. Yeah. But let's start by taking a look at the SGX Nifty. Well, flattish right now. And we're looking at, the Nifty closing just shy of the 11,600 mark. Of course, this is as far as the SGX Nifty futures is concerned. But let's move on and talk about the Nifty too, and where they've closed. Some of these indices have closed higher yesterday, at least as far as the benchmark. So, but a lot of weakness in the mid cap and the small cap. indices, as I was just talking about, and severe weakness in PSU banking index. A lot of that is on account of stocks like Bank of Baroda, which did see a sharp decline coming due. But as far as your other variables are concerned, in terms of ADRs, Infosys advancing by another 1%, as was the case for Tata Motors, but a little bit of weakness for Vedanta and ICICI Bank, and marginal moves for Wipro, Dr. Reddy's and HDFC. Of course, Wipro will again be in focus, considering it will announce its earnings this week, so keep an eye on that one. Moving on, let's also take a look at fund flows, and FIIs once again have bought stock worth, or rather sold stock worth 216 crores. The selling has not been as intense as what we have been used to of late, but DI is of course buying into the Indian equity markets to the tune of 592 odd crores on a net basis. As far as your contributors are concerned, the gains in Infosys, TCS and Kotak Mahindra were cancelled out by ITC, L&T and ICICI Bank. So all in all, of course, there were significant gains for Infosys, top gainer on the index, up 49 points, and that was possibly one reason why we did see the index close in the green. Had it not been for Infosys, we were very much in the red. But moving on, let's also talk about your futures and options space, and we do have unwinding this time in the Nifty futures and the Nifty banking futures. If that can come up, the Nifty banking futures should come up on a screen. That's also looking at around a 3.5% decline there. As far as your open interest is concerned, it's now a 700-point range. It's becoming more and more prominent now that the 11,300 on the lower end is your near-term support, and it's clearly it's taken over from 11,500 put in terms of the maximum open interest. But again, writing seen surprisingly around the 11,300, 11,400 puts. We'll be watching out for these. Of course, the VIX, of course, really didn't move too much. It's still at 12, and the Nifty put call ratio was again at a neutral level of 1.2. Again, not too much movement there either. And Dewan Housing Finance and IDBI Bank remain in the F&O ban, as was the case for Reliance Capital and Reliance Infra. But in terms of other stocks, watching out for RBL Bank, Tata Elxsi and Colgate Palmolive, all of them looking at a lot of shorts. In fact, Bank of India, of course, one of the contributors for the decline in the Nifty PSU index. And Dewan Housing Finance will continue to be in focus. It's down another 29%. Unwinding coming through there in Canara Bank. So we'll be watching out for these names, Alex. If you move past the benchmarks, it was a very weak day of trade, and a trend that we are expecting to continue today.
Thanks so much for that, Agam. All right, let's look at what's making headlines across the globe. Sue Keenan of Bloomberg News brings you the first word headlines.
Brexit talks are becoming more hostile as the divorce looms ever closer. Officials in Brussels say a meeting last week was one of the most difficult at any time in the past 3 years, with the British team seemingly trying to bully its way to new concessions. The EU is bracing for the expected appointment of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. He is threatening to quit the EU in October with or without a deal. To Iran now. Iran is warning that it may revive its nuclear program back to the status it reached before the 2015 deal was signed. Tehran says it may gradually back away from obligations in the agreement if EU powers do not do more to offset U.S. sanctions. The Iranian Atomic Energy Agency says a return to the conditions of 4 years ago would, quote, create a balance. The EU says there is still time to save the deal.
We'll see how we can, together with all the member states and also with the rest of our international partners, preserve the nuclear deal with Iran and put in place all the measures so that Iran can go back to full compliance as it has been till a few weeks ago.
The EU, meanwhile, is bracing for billions of dollars of U.S. tariffs as a 14-year-old dispute over aircraft subsidies comes to fruition. Brussels expects the World Trade Organization to give Washington the green light to impose measures of up to $7 billion. Duties on aircraft parts may be announced in the coming weeks, and food products may also be targeted. The move would add to U.S. tariffs already imposed on EU steel exports. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok, on Twitter, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan. This is Bloomberg.
Right now, the government is looking to raise up to 11,000 crore rupees from the sixth tranche of the CPSE ETF. The issue manager has been tasked with another job before the ETF is open for subscription on Thursday. Nikunj Ori has all the details.
The government plans to raise about 11,000 crore rupees from the CPSE ETF's further fund offer, which opens for investors on July 18th. The CPSE ETF Further Fund Offer 5 will have a base offer of about 8,000 crore rupees and a green shoe option of about 2,000 to 3,000 crore rupees, according to a senior government official. Whether the government will exercise the green shoe option or not will depend on the market conditions, according to the official. The government may also offer a 3% discount to investors, but the discount may be slightly lower since the asset management company managing the CPSE ETF will have to buy shares of Indian Oil Corporation first, since the government intends to keep its shareholding in the company to 51%. And remember, the government holds about 52% in IOCL currently. And since the weightage of the company in the CPSE ETF or the CPSE ETF index is over 16%, the government doesn't want to disturb that weightage that the company has been given and plans to buy the shares of the company before divesting it in the CPSE ETF. Over to you.
All right, let's move on now and talk about the stocks in news. Somit Sarkar is standing by to tell you all about that. Good morning, Somit. What's on your list today?
Good morning, Alex. On the stocks news, I'll start off with the earnings first. One major earning that came in yesterday post-market, Tata Metallics, another weak set of numbers reported by the company. The revenues of the company were higher by nearly 7% to close to 500 crore rupees, with the company's EBITDA was down nearly 32%. Close to 45 crore rupees. Margins came in lower at 9%, while the net profit was lower by nearly 36% to close to 20 crore rupees. Now, the EBITDA of the company was lower because of a higher raw material cost and higher other expenses in the first quarter of financial year 2020. Second on the list is Brigade Enterprises, where the company board has approved issue of bonus shares in the ratio of 1:2, that is one bonus share for every 2 shares held in the company, and it has also approved the issue of convertible warrants worth 115 crore rupees to the promoter group of the company at around 269 rupees per warrant price. Now, the current share price of the company is close to 264 rupees. Third on the list is Ashok Leyland, where the company has stated that their plant located in Pantnagar, Uttarakhand, will remain closed from 16th July to 24th July due to weak demand and outlook for the industry. This is the second time that the company has announced such a closure of plant for a limited time period. Fourth on the list is Tata Motors, where the company's where Prime Minister Theresa May has said that JLR will get nearly 500 million pounds of loan guarantee from UK Export to support development of electric cars. Fifth on the list is Dushman Carbogen. Now, GSK Pharma has announced a positive data in phase 3 study for ovarian cancer drug Zejula, and Dushman Carbogen, remember that they make the API for this drug, so that's a big positive coming in for Dushman company, and it will be also positive for the company when it comes to their revenue for the medium term. That is what Nirmal Bang is saying, and HDFC Securities says that the API revenues for Dushman would grow more than 2 times over the next 2 years, mainly on the back of this new API that the company will be getting from GSK Pharma. Last on the list is DHFL, where all the existing F&O contracts for the company will expire on September 27th, and henceforth no other contracts will be given for this stock. That's what the exchanges has said, and exchanges have stated that the reason for this move is that there is a significant doubt that has been raised on the ability of the company to continue as a going concern, and that's the reason they have decided to not give any F&O contracts post September 27th.
All right, thanks so much for that, Somit. Let's turn to some interesting news. After years of women asking Bond movie makers why the iconic character has never been female, reports are now suggesting that the next James Bond will be a woman. British actress Lashana Lynch, most recently seen in Captain Marvel as Maria Rambeau, teased this poster of the 25th Bond movie on social media. Take a look. Looks interesting, doesn't it? In the meanwhile, let me take you through some of the stories you'll find if you look up the website bloombergquint.com. We were just talking about some of that. But first up, let me tell you about news on the economy. India's trade deficit narrowed in June as a slowing economy and lower oil prices curbed imports. The gap between exports and imports was $15.3 billion last month, compared with $15.4 billion in May, according to data from the Commerce Ministry. That was higher than the $15 billion median estimate in a Bloomberg survey of 23 economists. Separately, core inflation, which is seen as an indicator of demand conditions, has plummeted over the last few months, reinforcing concerns about a slowdown in consumption in the economy. While headline inflation has been rising due to an increase in food prices, core inflation, which excludes food and energy prices, has fallen sharply. Wholesale core inflation fell to a 31-month low of less than 1%, according to data released yesterday. And retail inflation data released on Friday has shown that core inflation fell to a 23-month low of 4.1%. And the Reserve Bank of India has imposed a 7 crore rupee penalty on State Bank of India for not complying with, among other things, the central bank's norms on reporting frauds and income recognition. All right. Well, there is a lot of interesting stuff that you'll find on the website, bloombergquint.com. We've got a few questions with regard to an application. Let me find that out myself. My understanding is that we're soon to launch an app officially, but I'll get back to you on that. Thanks so much for watching. This is Bloomberg Quint.